Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jayo Radha Madhava Punjabi Hari Jaya Gopi Janavalabha Girivardhari Yashoda Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Kodanitai Maya Poshashi Kodanitai Maya Poshashi Jaya Kodanitai Maya Poshashi Kodanitai Maya Poshashi Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev 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 Dev Jaya Jaya Gurudev ISKCON Govinda Ki Jai Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai Shishiko Nitai Mai Pashashi Ki Gaura Premanandi Haribo Hare Krishna. So, reading from the Nectar of Devotion by Srila Goswami Prabhupada. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Bless you. Shri Chaitanya Manobhastam. Srila Goswami quotes another verse from the third canto, Srimad Bhagvatam, 33rd chapter, verse 6, in which Devahuti addresses her son Kapila Deva and says, "My dear Lord, there are 9 different kinds of devotional service, beginning from hearing and chanting. Anyone who hears about your pastimes, who chants about your glories, who offers you obeisances, who thinks of you, and in this way executes any of the 9 kinds of devotional service, even if he is born in a family of dog-eaters, the lowest grade of mankind, becomes immediately qualified to perform sacrifices. As such, how is it possible that anyone actually engaged in devotional service in full Krishna consciousness has not become purified? It is not possible. One who is engaged in Krishna consciousness and devotional service has without doubt become freed from all contaminations of material sinful activities. Devotional service, therefore, has the power to actually nullify all kinds of reactions to sinful deeds. A devotee is nevertheless always alert not to commit any sinful activities. This is his specific qualification as a devotee. The Srimad Bhagvatam states that by performing devotional service, a person who is born even in a family of dog-eaters may become eligible to take part in the performance of the ritualistic ceremonies recommended in the Vedas. It is implicit in this statement that a person born into a family of dog-eaters is generally not fit for performing yajna or sacrifice. The priestly caste in charge of performing these ritualistic ceremonies recommended in the Vedas is called the Brahmin order. Unless one is a Brahmin, he cannot perform these ceremonies. Jai. Srila Rupa Goswami Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, reading from Srimad Bhagvatam, Canto 7, Chapter 5, entitled Prahlad, the saintly son of Hiranyakashipu, text 55. Ata tan shlakshnaya vacha. Atan tan shlakshnaya vacha. Pratyahuya maha Buddha Pratyahuya Mahabuddha Uvacha Vidvams Tan Nishtam Uvacha Vidvams Tan Nishtam Kripaya Prahasan Eva Kripaya Prahasan Eva Atatan Shlakshnaya Vacha Pratyahuya Mahabuddha Uvacha Vidvams Tan Nishtam Kripaya Prahasaniva Atatan Shlakshnaya Vacha Pratyahuya Mahabuddha Uvacha Vidvams Tan Nishtam Kripaya Prahasaniva Atan Slakshnaya Vacha Pratyahuya Mahabuddha Uvacha Vidvams Tan Nishtam Kripaya Prahasaniva Atatan Slakshnaya Vacha Pratyahuya Mahabuddha Uvacha Vidvams Tan Nishta Kripaya Prahasaniva Atantan Slakshnaya Vacha Pratyahuya Mahabuddha Uvacha Vidvams Tan Nishtam Kripaya Prahasaniva Atan Slakshnaya Vacha Pratyahuya Mahabuddha Uvacha Vidvams Tan Nishtam Kripaya Prahasaniva Vacha Pratyahuya Mahabuddha Uvacha Vidvams Tan Nishtam Kripaya Prahasaniva Ata. Then Tan, the class friends, Shlakshnaya, with very pleasing Vacha, speech, Pratyahuya, addressing Mahabuddha, Prahlad Maharaj, who was highly learned and advanced in spiritual consciousness. Maha means great and Buddha means learned. Uvacha said, Vidvan, very learned. Tatnishtam, the path of God realization. Kripaya, being merciful. Prahasan, smiling. Eva, like. Translation: Prahlad Maharaj, who was truly the supreme learned person, then addressed his class friends in a very sweet voice. Smiling, he began to teach them about the uselessness of the materialistic way of life. Being very kind to them, he instructed them as follows. Responsively, please. Prahlad Maharaj, who was truly the supreme learned person, then addressed his class friends in very sweet language. Smiling, he began to teach them about the uselessness of the materialistic way of life. Being very kind to them, he instructed them as follows. Prabhupada ki jai. Prahlad Maharaj's smiling is very significant. The other students were very much advanced in enjoying materialistic life through religion, economic development, and sense gratification. But Prahlad Maharaj laughed at them, knowing that this was not actual happiness. For real happiness is advancement in Krishna consciousness. The duty of those who follow in the footsteps of Prahlad Maharaj is to teach the entire world how to be Krishna conscious and thus be really happy. Materialistic persons take to so-called religion to get some blessings so that they can improve their economic position and enjoy the material world through sense gratification. But devotees like Prahlad Maharaj laugh at how foolish they are to be busy in a temporary life without knowledge of the soul's transmigration from one body to another. Materialistic persons are engaged in striving for temporary benefits, whereas persons advanced in spiritual knowledge, such as Prahlad Maharaj, are not interested in the materialistic way of life. Instead, they want to be elevated to an eternal life of knowledge and bliss. Therefore, as Krishna is always compassionate to the fallen souls, his servants, the devotees of Lord Krishna, are also interested in educating the entire populace in Krishna consciousness. The mistake of materialistic life is understood by devotees, and therefore they smile upon it, considering it insignificant. Out of compassion, however, such devotees preach the gospel of Bhagavad Gita all over the world. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshuran Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shrivas Adi Gaura Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So Prahlad Maharaj is a 5-year-old boy. His father is a demon who happens to be in control of the entire universe. This pastime took place millions of years ago. And Prahlad is going to speak to his class friends who were expert in materialistic education and in enjoying themselves through the material energy. And he's smiling because it's useless. It's a useless waste of time because even if you become very successful materially and you accrue a lot of money and become famous, still when you die, you don't take anything with you. You may even lose the human form of life. Trihati Mahato Bhayat. Bhagavad Gita says the worst type of fear is to lose the human form of life, because if you lose the human form of life, then you have no chance of getting out of the material world. And it will take a long time for the soul to evolve back into the human form of life. So if you're behaving in a way which is inappropriate for the human form of life, then material nature looks at your desires and your consciousness and they think, so actually, I think you'd be happier in the body of a dog because that's the way you're behaving. So don't worry about council tax. Don't worry about taking the vaccine. I'm going to give you 4 legs and you can run around for 15 years and do what you want. Of course, that's okay for 15 years, but then you've got to get from the dog body back into the human form and then get out the cycle of birth and death. Samsara, the cycle of birth and death. And how do we get out of it in this age? This age is the Iron Age, age of Kali. In Kali, The way we get out of it is by taking the holy name ourselves and then giving the holy name to others. And so we have our emphasis, certainly at Karuna Bhavam, for the first 35 years anyway, was book distribution, to go out and give books to others. And the books are explaining how to chant. And also we should be studying the books ourselves so that we know how to chant. Any questions or comments? She need a cup of water. You okay? I've got some lozenges if you want. Yes, back to Alan.
So the human form of life is quite rare. And there's no guarantee that you'll get it if you don't follow Krishna consciousness. So that's an imperative to follow Krishna consciousness and chant.
Yeah.
What advice is there for anyone who's not sure about this sort of thing?
Well, Krishna consciousness is referred to as pratyakshagavamam dharmyam. Pratyak means direct perception. So it's considered, of all spiritual practices, that practice which gives you direct perception is considered the highest. So believing in something and hoping for the best is nice. There's a chance you'll get a human form of life, Mahapunya. But if you really want to make positive advancement, then you have to experience, you have to perceive. So if a person is dubious about something, then he would just have to try the experiment. He would just have to try rising early, refraining from illicit sex, intoxication, eating meat, and gambling. And for some part of the day, chanting the mantra, the Hare Krishna mantra, and seeing if it works, see if that does change his consciousness. Otherwise, so many people can recommend and say, oh, it's very good, yeah, I've been doing it for years. But so many people can recommend it, but you have to, just like so many people could tell you the honey is nice, and you have this jar of honey, and so many people are saying, I've tried it, it's very sweet indeed, actually. I think you'll really like it. So you could just leave it at that, or you could take the lid off, and you can check it out yourself. And once you taste the sweetness of the holy name, of course, sometimes people have the jar of honey and they're licking the side of the jar of the honey, and they think that they're doing it. You know, I've got the honey. Yeah, it tastes fantastic. And then after a while, they're like, actually, this is a bit dry, isn't it? This honey doesn't really do. And then they discontinue licking the jar of the honey because they think the honey doesn't taste that sweet to me. So we have to be aware of when we're chanting, have we taken the lid off? Are we actually getting a taste from the chanting? Are we focused? Or are we distracted all the time? Do we find it very hard to focus? Do we have to preoccupy ourselves with every other possible diversion possible? Because we don't want to open that lid. Because if we open the lid and we taste the honey and it tastes sweet, that will mean everything else will pale into insignificance. Shakrishna namacharitadi sitapya vidya. The ignorance, the disease of ignorance, the avidya, is there, and because of that, we can't taste the sweetness, we can't appreciate the sweetness. Even we get the lid off the jar, and we get the honey. If we have jaundice, then it doesn't taste sweet. Sweet things don't taste sweet when you're in a jaundice condition. So then, if the doctor says, no, you need to eat sweet things, and you think, well, the doctor must be wrong because this sweet thing that he's given me doesn't taste sweet. Or if you have faith in the doctor and other people are telling you, no, it is actually very sweet, but you have to continue. You have to continue taking the sweet things and they will start to taste sweet. And when it starts to taste sweet, when you can sit and chant without distraction because you're absorbed, you're enjoying the relish of the holy name, then you know you're chanting properly. And it takes a little bit of perseverance in the beginning because it may not taste so sweet. So do you have the faith to push through the initial stage of not so much taste to experiencing the taste of Harinam?
You said about the human form of life. Is there ways in which we can guarantee a human form of life next life if we're not taken to the spiritual path so much?
Yet if we just come in contact with prasadam, just like we've been reading now in the Nectar of Devotion, that you become eligible to perform sacrifices. Even if you just think of Krishna once, you just say his name once, you just see the chakra on the top of the Rath Yatra car, then you're guaranteed human form of life. Maha Punya. Then you may do nothing else. You may go off and do all kinds of nonsensical things for the rest of your life, but then next lifetime you come back again in a human form. And then if you go on from there, then you danya, then you get some treasure, then you purchase some transcendental literature, or you, in some way or another, secure some tangible spiritual benefit for yourself. Then again, you get a human form of life in the next life. And then you may actually decide you want to implement it. Just because something makes sense and it seems reasonable doesn't necessarily mean you're going to implement it. You know, you may be a biologist and you've seen 1 million lungs with cancer and you know it's the wrong thing to do, but you may still smoke. It doesn't necessarily imply that you'll implement. When you implement, you actually start to apply. Then swasti aina, then you embark on an auspicious journey. Then it's just a question of how many lifetimes now before you leave the material world.
I read that Krishna consciousness is a scientific process. So like chanting the holy name and your consciousness become purified. It's a scientific process. Could you enlighten us a little bit to that, please?
Well, you have sentiments where you could change, like you may have a sentiment, you may like water, and you may have a sentiment that water is always soft and smooth. And that's your sentiment. But scientifically speaking, the water can change its nature. If it goes into a freezing cold condition, then the water becomes very hard and brittle and not so pleasing to the senses. So you may have a sentimental idea about something, but that may not be aligned with what reality is. So Krishna consciousness is a question of perception. That's what science really is. If a scientist says, this could happen if you do this and that, I'm not quite sure, but I'd like to think that that's what would happen. Everyone will say, well, where's the experiment? We want to conduct an experiment, It's nice that you think that this could happen, but we need to go beyond that and put it into practice. And then when we practice, then it becomes a realization. We have a book called The Science of Self-Realization. And the reason why it's science is because science is based upon perception. But they don't go into the realm, they're in the gross realm of perceiving, but they don't go into the subtle realm of perceiving. So you may go down to an abattoir and see what takes place and get the realization that it's not good to kill animals. So that wouldn't be something that you could figure out on a gross platform. Something would stir in the heart and you would realize, wow. So realization just means you're coming in contact with reality. When you realize something, it means something that you've read or heard has now become a concrete reality for you. So the challenge is, when you read the books on Krishna consciousness, and intellectually you can accept them, can you take that to the stage of realizing? Can you realize that you're not the body? Can you realize that there's no pleasure in illicit sex, intoxication, eating meat and gambling? Can you realize that there is a supreme person and that you're part and parcel of him? And that's a question of your application of the practices of Krishna consciousness. And then we shift them from just something which is sentimental and sounds like a nice idea into a concrete reality. Yes, Ed, Haribol.
Haribol. Your metaphor about the honey was very effective, I thought, but can you just elaborate on that? How would you go from licking the honey to drinking the honey?
Yeah. So I was watching watching the devotees this morning chanting, and you can see by the way a person is behaving whether he's hearing or whether he's not hearing. I had a friend once, we were out on book distribution, and he took me over. He said, I want to show you something. And he took me over to a jeweler's window. And he said, what can you see? So I says, I can see a pearl necklace. There's some 22 karat gold rings over there. And that's a really expensive Rolex watch. He said, just look at the glass for a second. What do you see now? I said, oh, I can see a greasy mark. I can see a few fingerprints. I can see a bit of fluff over there. He says, what about the jewelry? I said, I can't see the jewelry now. He says, that's what chanting is like. Are you aware of your mind, or are you focused on the sound of the holy name? So the challenge is, can you focus? Can you look beyond this mental platform with all its considerations and fears, all to do with past, present, and future, actually? And can you step through that barrier into the eternal present? The eternal present never had a beginning and never had an end. It always was and is, and no time affects it. It just always is that moment. So the chanting is introducing us into this dimension, this realm, where there is no past and there is no future. There's just the present. And then we experience our eternality, we experience bliss, and we also experience knowledge. So somebody may be here in the temple physically. He may have his tilak on, maybe wearing his dhoti, but he may not actually be here at all. He may be a million miles away. You're only here when you're aligned and you hear the holy name, and then you go into this sacred space.
So if you said, would you say you feel, not think? Is that what you're trying to say? Maybe I'm misunderstanding.
And when you chant nicely, then you experience a living relationship with Krishna. You experience Krishna extending himself through the sound. The sound is none different from Krishna. So as you're hearing and they're interfering with that sound vibration, the sound vibration is able to manifest its personal attributes. And then you start realizing, oh, this is not an ordinary sound vibration. This is a living force.
Sorry, last question. Couldn't sound vibrations be a form of intoxication as well?
Well, yeah, love of God is intoxicating, actually. And we experience that if we're very advanced in chanting. Like Lord Chaitanya here, there's a beautiful picture. I was up in the Brahmacharya ashram today, which is looking tidier than it has done for a while. Could still be improved. And there's a beautiful picture there of Lord Chaitanya, and you can see he's not there in the material world. He's gone. It's called samadhi in Sanskrit. Samadhi is like a tortoise that withdraws its limbs within the shell. It disconnects from what's going on externally, and it goes into this other realm. And in that state, it's not toxic though, because toxic is a poison. It's amrit, which is a nectar. When you take amrita, it makes you eternal. Amrita dhan. What's that? Do you know that verse? Amrita duni. When you taste the nectar of the holy name, Amrita duni. And otherwise, it's like tasting the poison pit of material happiness. But when you bathe in the Aruta Dani, Amrita Dani. I'll find the verse anyway. But again, when you taste that, it's like, wow. Anyone that's here in Krishna consciousness who's been practicing for a long period of time, they've only been able to sustain that enthusiasm if they've experienced the taste. It's not possible otherwise. It's too austere, it's too boring. I have to sit here for 2 hours and just Hare Krishna, 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 and know this, know that, know the next thing. Then I've got to work really hard. And how could you keep doing that unless you're experiencing some spiritual pleasure?
Sometimes when people take intoxicants, and I'm not talking about some intoxicants, they have spiritual experiences.
Yeah.
And they feel like they've been brought closer to God. Is that genuine?
It would depend on how they behave. It's like some devotees came to Krishna consciousness through intoxication. And they may have had a conversation with some magic mushrooms, and the magic mushrooms said to them, listen, if you're going to do something, you need to take up this Krishna consciousness. But if you saw a man and he was driving to London, and he didn't know which way to go, and suddenly he found a sign and it said London 400 miles, and the man was so relieved. And you said, oh, that's good, okay. And then later on, you happen to be driving past 3 months later, and the person was still standing by the sign. And you say, well, didn't you, London's that way, 400 miles. And the man says, I know, but it's such a nice sign. I think I'll just hang around here and keep taking magic mushrooms. So you may get some indication, but the indication is to take up spiritual life, and spiritual life means becoming free from sinful activities that are going to bind you to the material world, and to proactively engage in some type of a practice of chanting mantra, offering prayer. So once you've had your epiphany and everything's wore off the next day, the challenge is, do you implement it? Do you move on from there? Or do you just stay hanging around that sign for the rest of your life?
Sorry, last question. Would you compare the epiphany that you might have on magic mushrooms to the epiphany that you might have when you're chanting?
Yeah, you could get signs. There's different ways that you can get signs. Generally, from where I've found, having spoken to devotees that have started to take up Krishna consciousness, they were given signs, and those signs indicated that they should move forward. And those signs can come in all weird and wonderful ways, And it's whether you want to. Then you find that some people don't actually want what the sign is indicating. They just want to keep seeking and not really finding it. So then it becomes a question of how sincere the person is. There's 4 types of people that go to Krishna. One in distress, one who's in search of wealth, one who's curious, and the highest grade is the one who's in search of the absolute truth. He really wants to understand, where is it all coming from? Where do we all belong? And Krishna says, of all 4, the one who is searching for me, searching for the absolute truth, is the most dear to me. So what he's indirectly saying is, you may have taken up Krishna consciousness because you were in distress, but now you have to shift over from that to searching for Krishna in knowledge. If you stay just in distress, what will happen when the distress goes? Oh, I'm fine again now. Okay, I think I'll go back out and try and enjoy in the material world, So your initial impetus for taking to spiritual life was because of the suffering and the frustration you're experiencing in the material world. But you have to go on from that, because when the distress is removed, you'll lose your impetus to practice spiritual life.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Can you expand on the part like someone who goes to Krishna because they're curious?
Yeah. Shishikonitai Mai Pashashi ki jai. Shri Tulsinath Maharaj ki jai. Shri Giridhari Lal ki jai. Shri Nrsimha Bhagavan ki jai. Yeah, so there's 4 types of people. The distressed, the desire of wealth, the inquisitive, and those who are searching for the absolute truth. So the different stages. So a person may not be particularly distressed, but he may be very curious. He may be inquisitive. He may be thinking, he may be thinking, what is this? What does actually happen at the time of death? Is there any way that we can know? Or should we just accept that that's just one of the mysteries of life that no one will ever understand? People say that sometimes. They say, no one will ever understand. Which in one sense is an absolute statement. So they're saying that that's the absolute truth. See, the funny thing about the absolute truth is, if you're not in search of the absolute truth, for whatever reason that is, that becomes your absolute truth. Well, I'm not searching for the absolute truth because I don't really think there's any point. And there's probably no absolute truth anyway. So then that becomes the absolute truth. There has to be some kind of absolute statement, you see. So if the person is curious, then there's another stage which goes on from that. He may be curious, but he may not be sincere. He may be curious for a little period of time, but then after a while, he becomes distracted and preoccupied with other things. If he's curious and he's sincere and he perseveres, then he can find out, he can get answers to his questions. But what happens quite a lot, Kartikeya Prabhu, is that the curious stage is soon renounced once we get older, we become very distracted with what we consider is more important. But initially, when we were a child, we may have been very curious, and we thought it was very important. When I was a child, I wanted to see magic. I'd heard about magic, and I was convinced that there was magic, but I'd never seen anyone do any proper magic. You know, you see guys pulling rabbits out of hats, but I wanted to see something mystical. I wanted someone to come up and do that and float in the air or something, you know. And I was convinced that there was something supernatural, something magical, you know. And then when I got into my teens, I was thinking, you better give all this magic stuff up, you know. You got to be real, you know. It's the real. This is the world, you know, the real world, and all this fairy stuff and magic and things. You know, we got to move on from that now and grow up, be real. So at that point, you may give up your curiosity and just think, well, no, nobody really knows what happens at the time of death. No one's ever come back to tell us. No one knows really if there is a God, and if there was, then why hasn't he popped his head through the clouds and said hello? And so there it finishes. The pursuit for knowledge finishes. The curiosity is given up as something which is a botheration, and we get on to more important things, like, how am I going to accumulate money to buy that thing I saw in the poster? The real world.
Can it be as well that someone can be seeking for some answers, but maybe afraid of the answers?
Yeah.
So that when someone understands some of the absolute truth, they may suddenly realise that with that comes a great responsibility, and you know, the requirement to change one's living habits and to give up things that are maybe comfortable or enjoyable. So can this be something that prevents people from going forward?
Yeah, it can. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Or sometimes a person may take up Krishna consciousness because they're thinking it will be something that will please their senses. It'll make them feel peaceful. They'll lose a few inches off their tummy. They may become more fascinating to the secretary, or whatever reason, you know. They may have their reasons. And so they take it up, and then they suddenly realize, God, this is a bit more involving than I thought it was going to be. I thought I could just, you know, get what I want from it and leave it at that. But it looks like this Krishna consciousness means you have to give everything. Krishna wants everything. He wants your consciousness, which is everything, actually, because whatever you have is only via your consciousness. And if Krishna wants your consciousness, then everything else is abandoned automatically.
Isn't one's consciousness also the property of Krishna in a way, because something parts and parcel of Krishna, so you're essentially,
Yeah.
you know, the sense of having any identity is a gift.
Yeah. Yeah, we're part and parcel of Krishna. And so he's our Supreme Father. We owe our existence to Krishna. He thought us into existence. And his intention was, see, everybody has we have a spectrum of living entities, and they all give Krishna pleasure in different ways, and nobody can please Krishna in the way that you can. Nobody else. That's why you were created. Nobody else can be you better than you. Nobody else can imitate you. Only you can be you in the way that you are. In your particular flavor, nobody else can please Krishna in that way. And the challenge is then, okay, can I find out what that is? What are my talents, abilities, and qualities that Krishna invested me with initially that are now covered over by the material energy? Can I revive those qualities? And can I use them in living service to Krishna, to please him? Just like the hand. One day the hand was getting a little bit fed up with the whole thing, you know, it has to work hard, it's digging all day, then it's pulling up potatoes, then the next minute it's giving the fork, it's going to stick the fork in, and then the hand's looking and it's going into the mouth, and then it goes from the mouth down into the belly. So the hand's saying to the mouth, you know, we're working really hard, you know, I've been digging the potatoes and peeling them and everything, and you chew them like anything, you know, you're working pretty hard, and then the next minute, the stomach gets it. And then the hand says, do you know what I'm doing from now on? I'm going to keep the potato myself. So the next time he gets a bowl of potato, he's squinching it round, and the belly's saying, "Hey, where's the potato?" And the hand's saying, "Forget it, pal. I'm going to enjoy this potato myself." It's swinging it, sliding around in it and squishing it up. And then after a while, the hand starts feeling pretty tired, Been doing this for a couple of weeks now. It's starting to feel really weak. And then it thinks, okay, I'll give it to the stomach. And then it feels okay. Well, you see, Rupa Goswami is explaining in the Nectar of Devotion that one of the first things that happens when you come to Krishna consciousness is it relieves you from material distress, which is good, but is also a problem. Because the problem is that if that's your only reason, then you may lose your impetus for staying in Krishna consciousness. So you'll have a certain concessionary period where you're relieved of distress, and it's up to you now whether you're going to move up the levels and get into knowledge as quickly as you can, because if you don't, then you'll just slide out and you'll go back. And then you have this toing and froing you see sometimes with some particular devotee will come along, he'll get relief from his distress, and then he'll go back out, and then he'll get smashed again by the material energy and get very much in distress, and then he'll come back again, then he'll get relieved, and then he'll go back out, and so this is called Bhoga Tyag. He engages in sense enjoyment, then he becomes disgusted, then he renounces, Tyag, and after a little while he thinks, it wasn't that bad, and then he goes back. And then he has this toing and froing going on. And if you're toing and froing all the time, then you've not reached the stage of Nishta, which is where you become steady. And we have to get to the stage of steadiness as quickly as we can. Prabhupada said he wanted all his disciples to get to the second class platform as soon as possible. Because once you're Nishta, Majjhima Adhikari, then you won't fall, then you won't become. So that's how long, and how long is it going to take? Generally it takes 10, 15 years to get fixed.
Sometimes I think that things are just so inconceivable that you just accept. How does just accepting, because maybe you have the faith that it works, that it's the truth, but how does it differ from blind following?
Well, it is blind to some degree. Somebody gives you the jar of honey, they say it's sweet, and you accept it on blind faith. Well, maybe it is. He seems to be pretty keen on it. And you take it, but then can you get the jar open quick enough before your faith wears off? There's a utsaha nishchaya, there's enthusiasm and confidence. You're confident in it. You're confident that it is going to be sweet, although it's not right now. But you're confident that it is because you're hanging out with people that are saying, "Oh, I've had 5 jars today, I can't get enough of it. I love it." So you're thinking, okay, well, it must be pretty good then. So you're confident, but then you have to be patient. Dariyat. You have to wait now. You get your jars of honey, you keep taking them, you think, one day. And sooner or later it will become sweet. And in the interim stage, you have to practice patience. Patience is similar to perseverance. I was doing a podcast last night about seeing Krishna's plan. So you won't see Krishna's plan if you're impatient. Generally, you see Krishna's plan in hindsight, and hindsight is a resource which is accorded only to those that have the patience to be able to see. So if you look at your life, in hindsight, you can see how Krishna was planning everything. But at the time, it can be very confusing. So sometimes you have to, when you're going through your confusing stage, you have to persevere, and then, lo and behold, oh wow, that's why that had to happen, Like the king that lost his finger, and God said, "It's Krishna's mercy." And he said, "Is it Krishna's mercy?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "Okay, is everything Krishna's mercy?" He said, "Yes, my Lord, everything is." He says, "If I throw you in the dungeon, is it Krishna's mercy?" And the minister said, Well, yeah, I suppose it must be, yeah. He goes, okay, well, I'll throw you in the dungeon. And he goes hunting that day, gets caught by the Dago worshippers. They see he's got one finger missing, and they can't throw him in the pot. So they let him go. He runs back. He says to the minister, I can see now it is Krishna's mercy. I got my finger cut off. I would have been dead otherwise. But how are you being in the dungeon? How is that Krishna? Because I'm normally with you, and I've got all 10 fingers. So I would have gone in the pot instead. So it was Krishna's mercy that you threw me in the dungeon. But at the time, he couldn't appreciate it was Krishna's mercy. But he had faith it was. So whatever's going on right now is Krishna's mercy. And for you to find that out, then you have to persevere with the spiritual practices. And then, lo and behold, goodness me, if I hadn't stayed a devotee and had stayed in my flat in the East End of London, I would have been hit by a bomb that got dropped that afternoon, or whatever it is, you know. So you would only know if you persevered. So it means having some faith, and the faith can be reinforced by hearing, by assimilating the information that are there in the books. They say if you distribute Srila Prabhupada's books, you're in a relationship with Srila Prabhupada, and if you read Srila Prabhupada's books, you're in a conversation with Srila Prabhupada. He's speaking to you directly, whatever it is that you need to hear, you know. And if you analyze your level of Krishna consciousness, do you feel happy and enlivened? And if you don't, then there's something gone wrong somewhere. If you take the scientific experiment that says you take a YouTube and a test tube, and in the test tube you put the 4 active principles, the 16 names of the holy name, and you mix it around and do 2 hours of japa, and you pour that out, and when you drink it, you feel really good, you feel really happy. So if you don't, then you have to look at the test tube again and go, okay, is everything in there? You know, because it's saying, according to the book, you just do that, and everything's fine. So the question is, are you chanting? Are you rendering devotional service? Are you doing things favorably with love? And if not, then can you align yourself to do that? All of us only have a certain amount of time actually to do that before we decide to discontinue the process. Some of us have longer time than others, some shorter time, but whatever it is, the quicker you can penetrate through into the taste level, the better and the safer it is. So be enthusiastic, be confident, be patient, follow the regular principles, abandon the association of non-devotees, and follow in the footsteps of advanced devotees. Hang out with devotees that are enlivened and experiencing taste from practicing Krishna consciousness. You have any questions, Prabhu? Thanks for coming. Generally, the process of assimilating information is to question it, not to just hear it and accept it blindly. That's why we have class and we open it up for question, because it's all based upon question and answer. If the questions are submissive and not confrontational, you genuinely do want to know, and you think that there is an answer to the question. That's how we understand, actually, not just by hearing something and then just in a brainwashed way, I believe this, I heard this morning, I believe there's 14 planetary systems, I believe there's 8,400,000 species of life. If you have a map, and the map shows you that if you come up Bunkhouse Road, you'll come to the Karunabhavan Temple, and you'll go past Nutro's Road on the way up, and then New Road and Beach Grove Crescent, then you'll be inclined to think, if the map's saying that here in the local area, then when you spin over and the map's saying that this is what it's like in Australia, because it's so accurate for where you are right now in your localized area, then you'll have faith when the map is telling you about other parts that you don't have any direct experience of. So the Vedic literature is like that. It's saying, do this, do that, do the next thing. So we do. We rise early. We refrain from this. We do that, and we think, okay, this is good. And then it says, there's 8,400,000 species of life. There's 14 planetary systems. There's people in another level that have 4 arms. And you think, okay, well, I can accept it because it's so accurate in the local area that it's talking about. 14. Yeah, there's different systems. We're in the Earth right now, the earthly system. There's many Earth planets. This is not the only one.
All right, so you mean like
And there's higher planets where they live longer, and there's lower planets where they don't get the sun. We're in the middle.
And, there's a lot of evidence about the experience that people have, like that proves what's in the Vedas. So I often find these things are useful to kind of fix our mind because we can question, we can go, oh, really? Could that be right? But we've got all these people's experiences and all these scientific proofs of things like reincarnation, of the effect of meditation, of mantras and things like that. So have you got any great examples of something that you could give us that would give us some like good proof that we could maybe look at?
I've got a really, really good one. It's a really, really good one. It contains 16 names, and it goes like this. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. You should try it. And that's our window into the spiritual world. That's where we experience that we're not the body. We experience who we really are, and that we don't finish at the time of death. All fear goes away in the sunshine. Krishna Surya Sama Maya Haya Andhakara, Yahan Krishna Dahan Nahi Maya Adhikara. Krishna is like the sun, and the material energy is like darkness. Wherever there is Krishna, there is no darkness. And Krishna is saying in the Gita, if you become conscious of me, you'll pass over all the obstacles. It's a big if. If you become conscious of me. Every day, that's the big if. Are you going to become are you conscious of Krishna today? Have you perceived his presence? If you have, there'll be no obstacles today. If you haven't, to the degree that you haven't, there'll be obstacles. And that's why the day is structured in such a way that the first thing we do is we chant Hare Krishna before we do anything else. We put on our psychic armor. We take the sword of knowledge and we slash with the weapon of knowledge all the attachments we have. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. You do that for 2 hours and then you take on the world. And wherever they got outside, they wake up. Oh, they put the snooze on. They've gone over their snooze. Oh no, I'm going to be late. I'm going to be late. I'm going to be late. Quick cup of coffee down the throat. Smoke a fag. Then they're in the car. Oh my God. Oh my God. They've had no preparation. There's no me time. People want to live longer. If you want to live longer, get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. You live longer. You have a longer day. You put an extra thread on your life. Stop sleeping. Sleeping is death. To a devotee, sleep is like death. Just listen to Srila Prabhupada, and he was saying, we have so many amazing things to do in Krishna consciousness that we don't want to sleep. We only sleep because we have to sleep. If we find enjoyment in sleeping, then it's enjoyment in the mode of ignorance. Enjoyment in the mode of passion is accumulating things, and enjoyment in the mode of goodness is acquiring knowledge. So we want to at least be in the mode of goodness. Yes, Kanguru in the key. Srila Prabhupada ki. Go to Premanandi.